Curt Hennig's name is synonymous with perfection. There really isn't a good way to express just how gifted this guy was, and in my opinion it's a tragedy that he never had a run with the big belt. A fantastic athlete and a gifted entertainer, with a God-given ability to take bumps that made his opponents look great, Curt Hennig wasn't just good, he was perfect. Let's take a quick look at the life and career of Mr. Perfect. Curt Hennig grew up in Minnesota, a childhood friend of Rick Rude, a friendship which would last throughout his entire career. Born into a wrestling family, Curt's father, Larry the Axe Hennig, was a 5-time AWA World Champion and helped with Curt's initial training. Much like his friend Rick Rude, Curt started out his career at the bottom, working in a jobber or enhancement role for more established wrestlers within the AWA. He had a brief stint in the WWF in a similar capacity before returning to the AWA and becoming a more established and well-rounded wrestler. Along with Big Scott Hall, he would capture the AWA Tag Championships in '86, and it wasn't long before Curt would have a run with the AWA World Championship in 1987, a belt he would hold onto for a full year before losing it to Jerry Lawler in May 1988. It was this loss that would drive Hennig back to the WWF with the promise of more money and a broadened exposure. To help introduce and establish the Mr. Perfect character, a series of vignettes were aired on WWF TV showcasing Hennig's ability to accomplish various difficult tasks perfectly.
Perfect.
He made bowling a perfect game or catching his own Hail Mary look easy. These vignettes were entertaining as hell and showcased Hennig's natural charisma, a charisma which was only matched by his in-ring ability. Following this introduction, he would go on to make his pay-per-view debut in the Survivor Series of 1988 as a member of the Heenan family, which also included his longtime friend Rick Rude. During '89, Curt would have various feuds with the likes of Bret Hart and Jimmy Snuka, further establishing the Mr. Perfect character, and following WrestleMania 6, Hennig went on to beat Tito Santana as part of a tournament to crown a new Intercontinental Champion. It was at this point Hennig enlisted the services of a perfect manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan. Perfect would go on to drop and regain the belt from the Texas Tornado before entering into various feuds for the belt with the likes of the Big Boss Man, Greg Valentine, and the British Bulldog. It was during this time that Perfect severely injured his back, leading to Perfect dropping the title to Bret Hart during SummerSlam '91 and forcing his first retirement from in-ring competition. If I had to recommend one match to see Mr. Perfect at his best, it would be this one. To say the guy was injured and still able to take Bret Hart to the limit was nothing short of extraordinary. It must have been incredibly painful, but he wanted to do the favors for Bret, and this is something Bret Hart never forgot. Perfect spent the following year recovering from his injuries and reinventing himself as the executive consultant to Ric Flair. He would also find success as a brilliant color commentator alongside Vince McMahon. In 1993, he began a high-profile feud with Ric Flair, leading to a match which would lead to the loser being forced to leave the WWF. Perfect won. Perfect would wrestle sporadically during this time in his career, but never returned to a full-time schedule due to ongoing problems with his back. After taking part in a number of forgettable storylines, Perfect left the WWF in November of 1996. Hennig would sign with WCW in mid-1997 and begin using his real name instead of Mr. Perfect, which was of course trademarked by the WWF. It was in WCW that Curt Hennig would go on to revitalize his career, taking part in many high-profile feuds and storylines. Initially, he would be reunited with Ric Flair as part of the Four Horsemen, but later betray the Horsemen by joining the NWO, afterward claiming he had destroyed the Horsemen. He would defeat Steve Mongo McMichael for the United States heavyweight title on Nitro the following night, which he would hold for 3 months before dropping the title to DDP at Starrcade 1997. Hennig was again reunited with his longtime friend Rick Rude following the Montreal incident, but was sidelined again in mid-1998 due to a knee injury. After flipping between the NWO Black and White and NWO Wolfpack and getting tanned by Goldberg, he would end up in the NWO B team, of all things, later getting kicked out of the group after speaking against them. Leading to perhaps his last memorable angle in WCW, Hennig formed a tag team with Barry Windham, which led to the creation of the West Texas Rednecks, with Windham, Barry's brother, Kendall Windham, and Bobby Duncombe Jr. They were presented as Southern country musicians who would go on to feud with Master P's No Limit Soldiers and record the infamous country song, Rap is Crap. The Rednecks were originally conceived as a heel stable, but were surprisingly popular with the Southern WCW fans, leading to the angle being dropped. Following this, Hennig would appear on WCW television for the remainder of his contract until leaving in the summer of 2000. Returning once again to the WWF, Hennig, again billed as Mr. Perfect, entered the Royal Rumble at number 25 and was one of the final 3 competitors before being eliminated by eventual winner Triple H. Perfect made a strong showing at the Rumble, hitting the Perfect Plex on Kurt Angle and holding his own with the WWF's best at the time. His performance, along with the positive reaction of the Atlanta crowd, earned Hennig a full-time contract with the WWF. Perfect appeared the next night on Raw in a match with Val Venus. He then had short feuds with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Rob Van Dam. Perfect's final televised WWF match took place on the May 12th edition of Heat, where he was defeated by Matt Hardy. Perfect was released from the company on May 7, 2002, due to a physical confrontation with Brock Lesnar on the infamous plane ride from hell. According to Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer, Hennig had pranked Lesnar by slapping shaving cream on his head, which started a scuffle and almost opened the emergency exit door. Hennig would turn up in TNA and worked a number of matches against the likes of Jeff Jarrett and teaming with B.G. James in a losing effort to win the NWA World Tag Team titles. On February 10, 2003, Hennig was found dead in a Brandon, Florida hotel room. He was 44 years old. The Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office declared acute cocaine intoxication to be the cause of his death. It was stated by his father that steroids and painkillers also contributed to his death. Following his death, a number of wrestlers including Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Kevin Nash praised Hennig's in-ring talent. Bret Hart has often spoke highly of Curt, stating, "Anytime I wrestled Curt was basically a night off. He was one of the greatest superstars who ever lived." In 2007, Curt took his rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame and was inducted by his good friend Wade Boggs. "Another of my wrestling idols taken far too soon,"